Today's a weird one. We're gonna be discussing I don't know if I should say infamous, because not a lot of people know about it, but the people who do, they don't like it. When it comes to mainline sequels, Square Enix doesn't really like doing that. If they do it, they reuse the assets. They throw it together for cheap, and then they make sure it's on the same system. You're not going to see a mainline sequel come out for the next console. You're going to get the Lightning Trilogy on PS3, and then it's going to end. People don't really expect any mainlines to get sequels anyway, but that's a little different for 10. For at least 15 years, Final Fantasy X-3 has sort of been the Half-Life 3 of Square Enix. There have been half promises. They've always talked about it. It always comes up in articles and random announcements like, yeah, you know, 10.3 might have, but I think they just said recently that they have it written. Like 10.3 is written, yeah. It's like, all right, when is that? Are we getting that or what? And when it came around to the 10th anniversary, they released a big old package, an HD remastered version of 10 and 10.2, or as I like to call it, Final Fantasy X over X minus 2. The game includes 10, 10.2, 10.2 Last Mission, and one other thing. This collection wasn't the only thing they released celebrating the anniversary. They also released a book. To stoke the fires of the fandom, the writers made a story that sort of sets up a potential sequel to 10.2. Spoilers ahead for both main games, because this story takes place after the base ending, like the normal ending of 10.2, but before the secret extra ending. It all happens within that credits sequence, basically. So it doesn't exactly continue the story, but it basically does. It sets it up. It tells you something that you didn't see before. So they just called it Final Fantasy X-2.5. Ien no Daisho, which I believe means Price of Eternity. But if you've never heard of this, it's probably because I don't think Square Enix wants you to have heard of it. It was released in Japan around the time of the HD remaster, and it was met with such negative reactions, and they never translated it. And you'd think such a dedicated fan base would have figured out how to translate it themselves or something. But it never, what we have is a half translation. It's like somebody translated it to French and then into English, like legitimately. It's just on a forum post, posted in chunks in replies. I had to read it just scrolling through the entire thing like that. It was awful. And it makes you wonder, if this is so important to the canon, potential future of Final Fantasy X, why is it so shrouded in mystery? Most people are at least familiar with some choice moments in the book that have been kind of overblown and exaggerated, because even the fan translation that we have, obviously, is not going to be 100% accurate. There's a lot of weird, vague, confusing things in this, and it's partially because the novel's intentionally vague, partially because Final Fantasy is weird, and partially because the fan translation is not entirely accurate. Most confusing moments are actually because of all three of those things acting at once. So here we're going to dive in, and I'm going to give you my best understanding of the plot of this book and what it might mean for the future, if 10.3 really ever freaking happens. So this takes place after the Final Fantasy X-2 ending, where Yuna and Tidus unite on the beach again. He doesn't really appear in the game until that point. You rescue him, you find him, he's resurrected. And they're happy, and that's the end, I guess. Could have been the end, but it's not. I believe if you 100% the game, you get the extra ending that shows Tidus and Yuna walking around, playing around in Zanarkand, and talking about themselves or something. It's been a while. So this book takes place between both of those endings. So what happens right after the reunion is they go into the town, you know, the first town on the beach that you encounter in 10. Yuna gets separated from Tidus due to some business she has with the church. She's kind of a big deal now. She's famous. She's the girl who not only defeated Sin, but then also led a successful air brigade of 2 other girls who hunted for spheres and destroyed a giant mech creature. I mean, the details of 10-2 are getting fuzzy to me at this point, but that's the gist of it. And this makes the town a bit of a touristy area. A lot of old people like to come to Yuna for guidance. This is because they used to believe in the god Yevon for basically their entire lives, and then Yuna just comes in and says, no, that was all lies, so I killed him. And now all the old people are like, well, what do we do now? Are gods a lie and we just know that for sure now? So they basically just start following Yuna. And meanwhile, Tidus gets to catch up with everybody. He gets to see Waka and Luna's kid. He meets Bria, or Briar, I'm not sure which one it really is. This is a new character who's serving as a priest in Besaid. He's very suspicious of Tidus when he finds out that he's actually from Zanarkand 1,000 years ago. He takes note of that. Why is he interested in that? I don't know, we might find out later. Tidus meets Pain for the first time, and she and Riku tell them, basically fill him in on the 10-2 adventure. They're like, yeah, there's a giant robot they were using to try and control everything, and Tidus doesn't believe them. It's like, you didn't do that, you're making that up. And they're like, Tidus, remember when you killed God? Is that more believable than the giant robot we killed? I don't think so. And then this book takes a jump to a different area with different characters. It does this a lot without warning. This is the story of Velm, who is a guardian to a summoner named Kush, or Kush, or Kushu. I don't know which one it is, but Kush is funny, so I'm gonna call her Kush. Basically, like Tidus is the guardian to Yuna, the summoner. They're like that. This story is taking place in the past. We see a bunch of invaders coming in, and they use bombs that are shaped like blitz balls. This is oddly a major focus in the book. They constantly remind you that they use blitz ball bombs. Every character, when they see one of these bombs, they're like, it looks like a blitz ball, doesn't it? It's like, yeah, it's gonna explode. Let's leave. They keep mentioning it. It's very weird. Velm is a part of the Albed race. You know those guys from 10 and 10-2, and they lost this war. Velm is in charge of creating machina, aka robots, for the losing side. Again, machina is a familiar term if you played the games. And while he's doing this, he finds out that Kush goes missing. Oh no, where did Kush go? I need Kush. He looks all over until he finds her lying naked with another summoner named Ifarnal. Sex confirmed. You thought it was Final Fantasy 16 that did it first. No, it was 10.2.5. Remember that for the next trivia night. Why is sex in 10.2.5? I wish I could say there wasn't a reason, but there is. We'll get to it later. It gets weirder. So before Velm can do anything about this, his robot army that he made comes in and shoots him. They immediately betray him, I don't know why. Now Kush, being a summoner, has the ability to send him to the far plane doing her little dance, just like Yuna does when she sends the souls so they can live peacefully in the afterlife. But for some reason she doesn't do it. And Velm, in this moment, as he's dying, decides, okay, fair enough, I kind of deserve to go to hell. And then he dies. I'm going to save you some of the jumping around from plot to plot and just explain this a little more. So Velm wanted to become Kush's Jushin, which is a permanent summoned guardian kind of thing. Basically, it's like an act of total commitment and love, but he would be basically chained to her, kind of like an Aeon, like a summon almost, for the rest of his days. But the reason Kush didn't send him to the far plane was because she loved him so much. She knew that he wanted to basically throw his life away to be her Jushin, but she didn't want that for him. So, as an act of love, she slept with another man and then sent him to hell. Meanwhile, in our story, Yuna and Tidus are having a romantic boat ride alone. They have some real talk about Yuna feeling guilty for taking away the elder's religion. And Tidus is like, yeah, but it was a lie, so it's a good thing. And she's like, yeah, but you know, it's still ruining them for the rest of their days. It's a lot weighing on me. Tidus doesn't take anything seriously. Yuna has a lot she's going through right now, and they kind of bicker a lot. Yuna tells him she didn't actually tell the elders that she helped kill God, but she did tell them that everything was a lie, and they still chose to believe in Yevon. Tidus gets mad about that, and it gets very existential. Real talk. Real girlfriend-boyfriend talk. And again, this novel's very vague. I did not miss a page. All of a sudden, it just says Yuna then gets up and starts picking up her clothes. I think Yuna and Tidus did it. I think they did it. Again, most successful couple in Final Fantasy history. I'll just say it right there. People are like, oh, Cloud and Tifa. I'm seeing lots of marriage trouble in their sequel, not this one. And I believe that moment is what bonds the two of them in their, total commitment for each other, like the Jushin thing that I was saying before. They don't know about that whole thing, but this will play into that later. They get interrupted by a massive storm and they get lost. The ship gets destroyed. They're practically drowning until Tidus sees a vision of his dad picking them up, and then they wake up on an island. They're both like, what happened? Yuna's like, I think we might have died. I think we died. We might have died. And Tidus is like, no, we didn't die. We must have got transported here like I did at the beginning of 10. And she's like, oh, you're right. I think that's what might have happened. So now they're transported to the past, or really another world or something like that. So they continue bickering/flirting, telling each other about the 2 years that passed, and then something happens. I am just gonna read this part verbatim, or fan translation verbatim. Tidus gets hit in the head with something, and he gets angry, and he turns around and he says, I wonder who its owner is. The young man was taken back whilst looking around him. He took a step forward to pick up the object, and then Yuna felt tears stinging her eyes. Her legs were shivering. She squatted and folded her arms around her shoulders. She was suddenly overwhelmed by an unbearable sadness. A powerful roar sounded through the air, and Yuna was thrown backwards. An object fell beside her. No, not an object. It was Tidus. His face was showing an expression of surprise, but only his head was visible. His body had disappeared. Yuna lost consciousness. Tidus died and got decapitated by a bomb. Tidus gets his head blown off. Tidus gets his head blown off. And immediately after, Yuna then sees a vision of a godlike being who starts interviewing her about Tidus and when they met and how she feels about him. Then he says, okay, I'll use some of my magic, I guess, and maybe I'll try to bring him back, but it won't be easy. And then Yuna wakes up. She wakes up to Tidus shaking her awake. He's like, Yuna, what are you doing? Get up. Wow, you must have hit your head really bad. So it's like, was that all a dream? The answer is no, it was absolutely not. Both of them are struggling to remember what exactly happened moments ago, but Yuna's like, hey, do you feel okay? And Tidus is like, yeah, I mean, I just kind of feel pain all around me in every part of my body, but we should probably move on. Anyway. And she's just like, okay. I'm not really cutting out any details, man. I swear, like, this is exactly how I read it. It's implied they use the power of beckoning, which is a new concept to this series now. Using the power of the Fireflies and Yuna's strong will to beckon him back as an incarnate spirit, Tidus is just back. So for no reason, he explodes and then comes back. Okay, sounds good. Yuna's also rocking a new green dress. Who gave it to her? I guess whoever rescued them and laid them in that house that they woke up in, but apparently she was in a bikini like this entire story up to this point. I didn't really know that until she was like, oh wow, finally I'm wearing clothes. They run into some statues of divine beings named Kush, Valm, and some others. And at this point it's basically confirmed they were shot into a past alternate world of Besaid, where those other characters we were following are from. So in order to try and get back, Yuna thinks that she needs to bond with the Faith and use the power to teleport them, so they go to the temple and try to find a Faith. There's no luck until Yuna hears an old man's voice calling her name, and she follows it and finds somebody communicating with her. The old man voice says, "I'll give you the power to return to your time, but only if you do me a favor. That boy Tidus must murder a young girl." And she's like, "What?" Meanwhile, back in the present, Waka, Riku, Pain, and that whole gang are kind of panicking, looking around for these two. And then we follow up on Bria, that new character we met. Turns out he's actually from the same time as Tidus and the current time that the two of them are trapped in. He's also extremely racist, because in his time, the Albed were the lower class, losing the war and all that. So as soon as he sees Riku, who is an Albed, he instinctually walks up to her to try and assault her. He's so racist that he just sees them and immediately tries punching her. But then Pain's there and she's like, "Who the hell is this?" And she effortlessly beats the crap out of him, ties him up, and they capture him. What is going on? What is happening? I don't know. They try to interrogate him about his time and how to get the two of the others back, and he doesn't really budge. What he does do is realize that he is actually Valm. He comes to this realization. She's like, "Oh, I'm Valm." Because he hears about all this stuff in the past and what's going on with them. He's like, "I'm the guy who got shot by the robots 1,000 years ago. And my soul was unsent, and I've been here the whole time, and I changed my name to Bria." Shinra, remember little Shinra, the weird kid in the full suit that we never get to see his face? He gets a turn interrogating the guy. Bria tells Shinra about the times before Machina, and the entire culture of Albed came from this poor class that they were racist towards, but with the teachings of Yevon sprinkled in. And he fools Shinra into letting him escape. Meanwhile, Tidus gets a vision from Kush. Kush tells Tidus to find Bria, aka Valm, and if you do that, I will save Yuna and send her back. But remember, you gotta kill that girl. And he's like, "Huh?" Before he can figure out what the heck she's talking about, she sends him to the present. Yuna then meets with Ifanel, who now goes by the name Johit. Everybody changes their name in this damn book. It's so annoying. He gives her important lore about the Faith. He says, yes, the Faith were created by Yunalesca in your world, but in my world, the Faith are created by when a summoner has a special bond with someone else. And it looks like this. And he shows Yuna a vision, and all that is said in the book is Yuna sees a vision that makes her blush in embarrassment. What did she see? I don't know. But at this point, I'm afraid to ask. This book is establishing that having sexual relations is now something that can grant you a special power. And Yuna and Tidus have done this. So this is a thing now. This is a thing in Final Fantasy X now. So Johit transports himself and Yuna back to the present, and he runs into Velm, aka Bria. That's awkward. So they get into an argument like, "Yo, you stole my girl." And Ifanel is like, "No, she did it out of love, I swear." And Velm's like, "Shut your bitch ass up." And he throws a bomb at his face and he explodes. I swear this is literally what I read. Again, remember the disclaimer at the beginning. I don't know what's entirely accurate translation. I don't know what's meant to be interpreted literally. I don't know. But they get into a fight and he explodes. So Tidus and Yuna find each other. They bring Velm and Kush together like they wanted, but it turns out that Kush was the girl that they were ordered to kill. But it's more like turning off her life support, because her soul has been stuck here all this time, waiting for Velm to return. So they look into each other's eyes one last time, and then they vanish, finally at peace. And all of that happens after the first ending of 10-2 and before the credits scene. So then there's a tiny time skip. They go to Xanarkand together. It's that scene, the 100% ending is happening now. This scene can now be watched in a sort of different context, because we know that Tidus is not like really alive. He's like a zombie Tidus now. And Yuna knows. Tidus says, "I wonder what I really am. Am I even real? But Yuna smiles at him, and Tidus smiles back. Tidus trusts in her smile. To be continued. It says to be continued. Now to sum it all up, to sum what happened there up, 3 big takeaways. 1, the power of sex can bring about a faith or give you like a new ability or something. The concept of beckoning is one of those abilities that you can only use on like that higher level. So that's a new concept. Resurrection, essentially. Even though there are other ways to resurrect established in this series, but whatever. Number 3, Tidus actually explodes and dies for no reason and gets resurrected via the beckoning power and is now existing as this Firefly ghost spirit. Because of what he is, he's kind of under Yuna's control, quote unquote. What exactly control really means, I don't know. But if Tidus ever learns of this, he will fade away. He'll be gone for real. Yuna knows all about the situation. She knows everything that's happening, pretends not to know because she doesn't want Tidus to go away. Tidus is blissfully ignorant to his fate. And they smile at each other in the end. Tidus is trusting in Yuna, and Yuna is completely lying to him. And that's how it ends. I just don't know what to say. Like, you could have, aside from the sex thing, you could have written a Tidus death story as a setup for a sequel. I just would have liked if there was a reason that he exploded. You know? The best is reading about online forum speculation, which ran absolutely wild when this came out because nobody had any idea what was really happening. You gotta hear some of this stuff. Don't get me wrong, whatever's happening here is undeniably weird. Like, it's so out there for what anybody would consider Final Fantasy. The grotesque beheading of a main character out of nowhere. The weird sexual situations, of which I didn't mention all of them. Like, what in God's name were they thinking? What is this? There was a rumor going around that people actually believed for a long time that the writer of this, who's a big writer in Final Fantasy, accidentally submitted a fan fiction story, and they thought it was written from him, and they accidentally published it. That's so ridiculous. Obviously it's not true, but people actually believed it because they just needed some explanation for why this story was so what are you doing? Why did you do this? And that's why I consider this to be one of the biggest mysteries in Final Fantasy, because they don't say anything about it. They act like it doesn't exist. It only does exist in Japan, technically. And even the fans don't want to talk about it. The hardcore, like the Ride or Die 10 fans are like, you killed this. Why did you do this to my beloved video game? I don't want to think about this anymore. There's so many people offended, so offended by this. And we still don't know exactly what's real or what precisely they were trying to say. It's just an extremely vague novel, translated to French, translated to English. But what we do know is that whatever did officially come out in Japan was met with horrible negativity. The Japanese fans are up in arms as much as the English fans and everybody else around the world. So even if some of the things I explained might have been exaggerated or slightly incorrect, the gist of the story did happen. All the sex that happened, that wasn't made up. It happens so many times in the book. It wasn't mistranslated 5 times. And you might be wondering about the to be continued thing. This is what I was getting into. There actually is an additional thing that's actually on this cartridge, came overseas to the West and everywhere else. It's called Final Fantasy X Will. Or as it's shown in this collection as credits and bonus audio. It does not tell you anything else, and definitely doesn't mention 2.5, but this is a follow-up. This is the continuation of that to be continued at the end of 2.5. But now you have the context to what this is actually following up. It is the latest entry chronologically in the 10 franchise. It happens after 10.2, after 10.2.5, even after 10.2 Last Mission. It follows the story of Kurgum and Chuami, who are new characters. They are just kind of arriving in this place and exploring. But we start out at a blitzball game where Tidus is playing, and Tidus is a big famous blitzball player now, and also the savior of the world, but everybody loves him. He's a big star, and these two are smitten. They're like, oh my god, it's Tidus, wow. They shake his hand, and they specifically mention that it feels strange and weak or sick. No context for why, if you just played 10.2 and then immediately listen to the audio, like, why does Tidus feel weak? What's that about? It's because he's dead. You don't know that unless you read this book. So Kurgum is like a sender. She's a little bit like a summoner. Chuami is the assistant. As they meet the 10 crew along their little journey here, she mentions, oh, these guys knew my dad. They were buds with my dad. They were like chill with my dad. It turns out that Oren was her father. So he had a daughter, didn't say anything. I guess that's Oren. I guess that's something he'd do. They go to the temple to meet Yuna and learn about all the Yevoners who still pray and hold on to the false values of Yevon, and she calls them weak fools. This Chuami chick is kind of mean and not accepting of others' beliefs. Waka tells her, be kinder. They're actually here because they have a package for Yuna from the chancellor of their town, and it's one of those video recording spheres we've seen a couple times in the games. It shows a video of a shoe puff, which are supposed to be extinct, so how is that here? And also the moon flow is overflowing. By the way, the moon flow is overflowing. I don't know what that means. Yuna realizes that the shoe puff may have been beckoned back using that power. They use the term beckon, and again, it's not established what beckoning is unless you read the book. So if other people are walking around doing this blasphemous act that Yuna did, hypocrite, she needs to put a stop to it. On their way out, Lulu does not believe that Chuami is Oren's daughter because a lot of people come in here claiming that they're Oren's offspring just to try to get his free stuff.
But if Oren did have children, there's no way you wouldn't remember him, and he wouldn't hide it from us. Oren isn't that kind of man.
Big breasts, bigger attitude.
So they take a trip to the far plane, and they see even more souls being beckoned back. This is bad. We can't just keep beckoning everybody. I know I did that, but nobody else can do that. During their investigation, as if it couldn't get any worse, Sin is back. Just like that. Sin, the main antagonist of 10, who wasn't in 10.2 because he was dead, is now back. The theory, somebody beckoned him. Who beckoned the evil destroyer of everything back? Who did that? So very quickly, Yuna goes back to town and tells Tidus that she has to break up with him now. She says it's because she's in love with someone else, which is a lie, because really, she's just jealous that he's being too friendly with another girl. This random high school drama just starts happening out of nowhere. So she breaks up with Tidus right then and there. Really, I think it's a mask. She wants to protect him because she knows that if he finds out Sin is back, he will probably sacrifice himself. Yuna is doing a lot of work to make sure Tidus doesn't die again.
You're not yourself.
Yeah, something's wrong with me. I didn't think this would... I'm sorry.
Well, as long as you're aware of it.
So all the summoners group together, and they go off to try and fight Sin. Because that's the only way they know how to beat that guy. So who beckoned him, we don't know. Tidus goes running after Yuna because, he's that type of protagonist. He'll do anything to set things right. I don't care if she broke up with me. I gotta save her. Because we'll be together no matter what. Yada, yada, yada. They go and fight Sin, and then it ends. I mean, this is a 30-minute audio drama. It's really quick. I explained basically every important thing. They find out people are using the beckoning power, and Sin is back now. And Yuna and Tidus break up very abruptly. 2.5 was weirder, but why are they doubling down on the craziness? What's happening in 10? In post 10.2? What is happening? That is actually the end. We have now covered every piece of Final Fantasy X. It just leaves you with the question, what are we doing? What actually am I supposed to do with this information? I think what sets 10.3 apart from Half-Life 3 is that clearly they want to make it. Some people still think like 10.3, no, it's over, the time has passed, we're not getting 10.3 ever. And I'm like, why would they make this? Why would they make 2 extra additional story things that specifically end on cliffhangers to lead into the next thing? Like, Sin is back and they're gonna go fight him. That sounds like they're making another game. But this was 10 years ago or something. So they're not making it yet. I still think they're making it though. I think the story that we really want to believe these days is that they do want to do it, but they want to make it big. See, here's the thing. There's never been a mainline sequel that wasn't on the same console. Mainline sequels exist because they're cheap. You can't make a cheap 10 sequel now. You can't release a game that looks like a PS2 game in 2023. That's just how it is, because people would be mad. I would play it. I would love it. But the general public would be mad. The latest thing I heard, I think this year, is that 10.3 is fully written. Whoever's in charge of writing it, they're done. But they can't make 10.3 because the team that would do it is a little busy with a certain trilogy of massive games that will take a total of 15 years to come out. Yes, I'm talking about the remake trilogy. So people are saying it's been too long, they probably gave up on it. No, it's because they accidentally picked up a 15-year project. We gotta wait for Rebirth to come out, and then the next remake, the third one, and then maybe we can get 10.3. And now I'm hearing rumors that 10 remake is in the works too? I don't think we exactly need that, but if this is a tactic to get people interested in 10 again, so you could follow it up with a big ol' sequel that is relevant again, that could be what they're doing. Too bad this absolutely insane book of lore that is not released in the US is standing between 2 and 3. And like I said before, I don't think Tidus being dead, or like a spirit, is a bad thing. We already have the 10 ending. 10 ended, and 10.2 followed up with its own weird stuff that some people hate. So if you love 10.2 but also hate 10.2.5, then guess what? You still have those other 2 games. I wish Tidus dying was written a million times better, but if we have to go into 10.3 with this, I still have hope. The sex power thing is really throwing me off though. So like, imagine a whole new journey dealing with the beckonings, and Yuna has to fight to stop people from getting their loved ones back because it causes all this trouble. But she's being a total hypocrite because she has zombie Tidus there the whole time, and she has to make sure no one finds out, ultimately bringing us to the emotional wreckage that was the ending of the first game, accepting that Tidus has to go for good. That sounds like a really interesting emotional journey, like wagging your finger at everybody for using the beckoning, fixing their beckoning stuff, and then having to decide like, okay, if I'm being real about this, Tidus, you're a spirit and you gotta go. The only problem, his canon death by bomb falling on his face for no reason at all, I think stands as the most shocking and dumbest moment in Final Fantasy history. I could not tell you how many times I read that over because I couldn't believe what I was reading. And some people say his head didn't actually fly off, but every translation I've seen describes that happening. So I don't know why they were excessively grotesque with it, but they were. And these out of nowhere strange sexual moments, like why would you put that in this? Why would you do that? And then Sin is back all of a sudden. Oh, Sin's back, we gotta fight him. To be continued. It's insane. This whole thing is crazy. If you were hoping to go through life never actually learning about 10.2.5, I'm sorry I ruined that for you. If you're a 2.5 fan, dude, sound off in the comments, please. Tell me why 10.2.5 is actually cool, because I don't know. I love 10. I love 10 too. But this was crossing the line. That's all I got. I hope you enjoyed that weird episode of REFFOID. We're gonna go back to normal stuff next week. We're gonna just play a 3DS game next week. How about that? I think that'll be good. Okay.